Good day, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today for the webinar, Career Transition, the Difference Between the Burnout and the Need. Now, let me tell you a little bit more about Kelly Studer. She's a career stylist who coaches ambitious, career-minded professionals through the career transition process, as well as define and develop their personal brand, ultimately resulting in obtaining more sustainable success, fulfillment, and happiness in their career. She leads workshops on negotiating for women and regularly speaks on the topics of professional image, networking, and job search strategy. With this, I would like to hand it over to Kelly so she can give you a little bit more information about herself.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be leading this webinar today. It's a topic I'm super excited about, and I'm so happy to have all of you on the line today. So with that, I'm just going to jump right in. So you probably already know, but I wanted to cover what we're going to learn in this webinar. So, I just want to thank you in the first place for taking the time to come and join this. I have a feeling that many of you are feeling frustrated or stuck in your careers, and you're looking for some inspiration and some ideas on how to move out of that, and it's a very common problem. And so I'm excited to talk to you about ways to do that. So what we're going to first do is we're going to diagnose whether you are experiencing burnout or you're actually in need of a career change. And there is a big difference between the two. And so I'm going to go through an exercise of helping you figure out which category you fall into if you're not quite sure yet. And then I'm going to take you through step-by-step plans for how to turn that burnout into a re-energized career, as well as for people who may need a career change, what are some ways in which you can get more clarity on the best direction to head in next. And then lastly, once you have been able to figure out exactly what you want to do, how to create an elevator pitch that is guaranteed to open doors to new opportunities and have people showing up to help you in making that transition. So that's what we're going to cover today. And my promise to you is by the end of this webinar, you are going to experience genuine excitement and motivation to take action in your career immediately. And I think another really important thing is, you are intelligent, you're talented, you're ambitious, you're probably, an overachiever. And I want you to, by the end of this webinar, give yourself permission to go after a fabulous career that will bring you more fulfillment, happiness, and success. There's absolutely no reason for you to not have an incredible career. And to be stuck where you are, is not your fate. And another promise to you is that you will be fired up and ready to make a change in your career, whether that's to get out of burnout or move it in a new direction. Okay, so are you ready for that? I hope so. So I wanted to check in with you to see if any of the following things sound familiar to you. If you're having any of these thoughts or feelings, and I guarantee you if you are definitely not alone. So maybe you're afraid you're going to get stuck in an unfulfilling job and you're not sure how to get out of it. That might be one thing you're experiencing. Maybe you fear it's too late to make a career change without completely starting over. I can relate to this. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my story, but it's very common that we'll have 10, 15 years of experience, and to think of moving into something else at that point and starting over is really financially and emotionally scary. Maybe you don't enjoy your job anymore, and I call it the Sunday night depression, where on Sunday evening, when you think about going to work in the morning, on Monday you're like, oh God, do I have to? Maybe you even have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday night depression, and then Friday around 5:30 or 6, you're like, thank God it's the weekend. That might be the experience that you're having. You haven't performed as your best self in a while, and maybe your performance is slipping. I guarantee that you have been a superstar, and a superstar performer, been a top performer, and really had a lot of growth in your career, and suddenly maybe that's not the case anymore and you're not sure what's happening. Like, why are you stalling out? And I guarantee it's not that you aren't a superstar anymore. You're not even sure what you're good at anymore. You've lost the confidence you once had. This is something I've seen be very common in a lot of people, a lot of the clients that I've worked with who are actually incredibly successful people. They can't even see their own success and their talents and what they've accomplished. They're just kind of at this place where they've been beaten down a little bit and don't feel great about their work anymore. And it's really frustrating. And maybe you want to reclaim that experience of being a high performer and excited to go to work each day. You want to feel successful again. So I've been there. I've experienced all of those things, and I want to share a little bit about my story and how it led me to where I am today. In fact, because of my own experiences, it has ignited a passion in me to help others find more fulfillment in their careers and to tap into their best selves. So when I went to UCLA with the intention of becoming a film producer. That's what my dream job was when I was 15 years old, and I went to UCLA, right there in the heart of of Hollywood, and I did a couple of internships, and I quickly realized that I would be eaten alive and spit out in that industry. I didn't have the confidence to kind of hold my own in there, and it sort of made me realize maybe this isn't what I want to be doing. But I was a history major, so I graduate from UCLA and I have absolutely no idea what to do. But I decide I want to live on the East Coast, so I moved to Boston. I don't even have a job, and I literally fell into an opportunity to be a recruiting coordinator for Andersen Consulting, now Accenture. And it was amazing because it turned out that it was a great fit for me. And it's funny because I don't think anybody, dreams of being a recruiter. I think everybody I've ever met who ended up being a recruiter, it happened by accident. It's sort of this job that, people don't typically talk about, doing when you grow up. But it was a fabulous fit for me and what I was good at, and I really, really enjoyed it. But about 9 months in, here I am recruiting all these consultants, people who have a background that is almost identical to mine, and I'm thinking, it's much more prestigious to be a consultant than a recruiter. I want to switch to the consulting side. I want to get more business experience and see what that's like. So I convinced them to let me switch to the consulting side, and I was doing that work for about 14 months, and I was bored to tears. I did not enjoy it. It did not excite me. I had Sunday night depression going to work, and I missed recruiting. I was really shocked, actually, by that. But some of my own sort of, preconceived notions about what is a great career to have was in question. And I realized that I was good at recruiting, and I liked it. And at this time, after 2 years in Boston, I decided I wanted to move back to San Francisco, to the Bay Area, where I'm originally from. And Andersen wasn't going to transfer me because they had a lot of consultants who were not staffed, and they didn't want to take on another person to sit on the bench, as they call it. So I quit, and I moved back to San Francisco, and I ended up getting a job back in recruiting. I went back into something that I knew I was good at and enjoyed at a company called Sapient, which is a smaller high-tech consulting firm. I spent 3 incredible years working there, working with some incredibly smart, talented people. I had amazing growth opportunities. I was traveling all over the country to recruit college students, planning tons of events. But towards the end of those 3 years, I was also feeling pretty burnt out. It was like non-stop. There were no breaks. I was exhausted. But at the same time, it was early 2001, and things started coming to a screeching halt when the dot-com bubble started to burst, and I got laid off. It was shocking. I was horrified and very upset. I took it very personally. I also noticed that nobody needed recruiters. Everyone was downsizing. What do you need recruiters for? I had to come up with a new job, a new career path, and I didn't know what to do. But I was also very burnt out on recruiting, and it was almost a relief that I wasn't going to have to be in like a crazy recruiting job again. So, of course, what do? I decide now I want to go back and try and be that film producer that I never attempted to become back when I was 22. I thought, you know, I'm 29 now. I have a lot more confidence and maturity than I did at 20, 21, 22 when I did those internships. And at the same time, I was terrified to go down and probably make the worst salary of my life, have to totally start over at 29 where my peers are going to be 22, like I would have been if I had done it right out of college. But I knew in my gut that I had to try. I was going to regret not finding out if being a film producer really was the dream job for me. So it was a very interesting 2.5 years working in the film business. I started out working for some literary agents as an assistant. I was making $22,000 a year with the worst benefits package you can imagine. But you know, I knew that money was not the most important thing for me at that moment and that it would come later. And I just changed my lifestyle a little bit, but I actually wasn't any less happy having less money, which was an interesting revelation. And I also, while I was working at the agency, I produced my own short film. So I went out there and actually became a film producer. And it was the most gratifying experience one of the most gratifying experiences I've ever had. I had no idea how to produce a film. I had to teach myself those skills and that knowledge. But what I found is that my talents applied really well to being a film producer. I was able to bring together an amazing cast and crew. I didn't even pay them, and I still got really experienced professionals to do this film project. And we had a blast together. There was no drama. Everyone worked together brilliantly. They've still, you know, continue to work together, having me brought them together, which is exciting. And I love negotiating the deals on the film and the equipment and managing it all happening and then marketing it. And it was really gratifying to know that I'm good at this, and it was a lot of fun. However, then as I moved on from the agency, and I was lucky enough actually to skip 2 years, so to speak, and not have to become a producer's assistant. And instead, I got a job at the creative level where I was helping to do script development and make films a reality. I also worked for a very insane, crazy producer at Paramount who was incredibly difficult to work with. And I was like walking on eggshells every day at work because I never knew what was going to happen with her. And it was a difficult place to work. And you know, the farther I got into sort of the Hollywood lifestyle and the way things worked and all the people that I met and was working with, it started to create a lot of friction for me, and it didn't feel good. You know, I felt like something was not right. I didn't like living in LA. It didn't feel like home for me. I didn't necessarily enjoy the people I was working with, and it really dawned on me that while I loved producing that short film, I can't continue to do it in a bubble. I'm not independently wealthy. I can't fund my own films, and I would have to do it within the Hollywood framework. And I just didn't see that being something that would work for me in the long term. It was eating away at me as being the wrong environment and really kind of against my core values. So I learned a lot through that experience, but I also learned that being a film producer was not going to be my ultimate dream job, but it was a very helpful learning experience. So I just quit the Hollywood business, and I went back up to San Francisco, ran into a friend who I worked with at Sapient, who is now working at this company called Google, and she said, "We're looking for people in recruiting. Why don't you send me your resume?" And I hadn't thought about going back into recruiting until I ran into her. But I realized there was a lot of overlap between what I did as a film producer and what I did as a recruiter. And so I ended up working at Google for 5.5 years, had the incredible opportunity of building a team of people. We developed all of the programs for college recruiting, engineering talent across the world for Google, and building the employment brand. And I loved managing a team and developing the talent on the team and helping them come to their full potential. And it was a great experience. But in my last year there, I moved into another role, and that didn't end up being a very satisfying role for me, and I couldn't find something else I wanted to do in the company that I was excited about. And I thought, you know, it's a much bigger company than when I started, and I tend to like a little bit smaller, high-growth companies. So I thought maybe it's time to consider something else. And then Salesforce came knocking and recruited me for a director of recruiting operations role. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to go to Salesforce and if it was the right company for me, but I thought if I'm going to leave Google, you know, it has to be on a certain number of terms. I gave them my terms. They met every single one of them, which I was shocked by. I'd never actually been so demanding before and have them say yes. I couldn't believe it. In fact, I didn't know how to say no to the opportunity, even though my gut was telling me, I don't know if this is the right place for you. And so I spent about 14 months working at Salesforce, and during that time I got increasingly more frustrated and a little depressed about my career, actually. You know, I had a lot of responsibility but not authority. My talents were not appreciated there. My values felt like they were out of sync, and I was becoming more agitated. I didn't really like who I was when I showed up to work each day. And that's what got me thinking about some entrepreneurial desires that I'd had for a long time to start my own business. And so, you know, looking back on all of my experiences, having taken inventory on, you know, what would be fulfilling to me, what my greatest talents are, you know, what skills and experience I have and how can I apply that, you know, that led me to start my own business as a career stylist. And it's been absolutely the best decision I've ever made, and I've never been happier. So as you can see, that's a lot of information about my story, but you can see that I've been through, this is my third career transition. I've gone through burnout. I know what it's like to be in your shoes and what it takes to get to the next place. And, you know, my journey so far has been amazing and had its ups and downs, but growth experience all the way along. Don't you just look at this picture and think, yes, I have felt like that. So let's see if it's true for you. So hopefully you have a notepad or a piece of paper or something nearby, because I want you to make a tally mark for each time you answer yes to the following, I think, 10 questions. Are you usually considered a high performer, but your performance has been slipping lately even though you're working tirelessly? So you're working your butt off, but somehow you're not performing like you used to be, and it's really frustrating. Do you have a hard time setting boundaries around the days and hours you work? This usually shows up as you feel like your company basically has the right to you 24/7, and you're nonstop, you know, checking email, responding, working crazy hours, and there's really no room for your personal life in there. Do you feel completely exhausted? Do you have a hard time saying no when asked to take on new responsibility? So it's just piling up how much you have to do? Are you unable to remember the last vacation or holiday you took in which you completely detached from work and didn't send any emails or put out fires? And this could just be that you haven't taken vacation in quite a long time. Do you actually enjoy what you're doing, yet it comes at a cost of not taking good care of yourself, so you're not having work-life balance? Do you feel physical symptoms of sleep problems, stomach pains, headaches, fatigue? You're feeling it physically right now. Are you working long hours, but you still have incomplete projects and work? Like, are things just not really getting done even though you're working a lot? And are you making mistakes you didn't used to make? This comes up with burnout too. You just get a little bit sloppier, you know, the attention to detail goes down. And do you find that you're in a bad mood or lose your temper easily? Okay, so those are the questions for burnout. Now we're going to check and see how many yeses you say to the following questions about needing a career change. So again, maybe, put a line through, and then this is going to be your career change tally list. So at work, do you find yourself easily irritated and frustrated by small things or constantly losing patience? This was what was happening to me at Salesforce. I was like this every single day. It was awful. Have you not been performing as your best self in quite a while? Again, this was what happening to me also when I was at Salesforce. I knew that, I'm like, this is not my best self showing up to work every day. They don't know, like, my best self. I wish they did. Do you sometimes feel ignored by your manager, or that he or she focuses primarily on your weaknesses rather than your strengths? Do you feel like you've hit a career plateau and are coasting in your job, or it's just really kind of stagnating? Do you feel bored, or your job has become routine? When offered a new project, do you have a hard time being enthusiastic about it? Are you like, sure, I guess I could do that. Okay. As I mentioned before, do you get the Sunday night blues and desperately look forward to the weekend when you don't have to be at work? Is your job meaningless to you or altogether unsatisfying? Like there's really nothing purposeful or fulfilling about it? Do you spend a lot of time daydreaming about what other jobs you'd rather be doing? And lastly, are you certain you want to be doing something else but aren't sure how to go after it? Okay. So basically, if you have answered yes to 7 or more of the questions on either category, that should tell you which one you fall into. Now, it's possible that you might have more than 7 in both, which could mean that you need a career change and you're totally burnt out. But what I really think that burnout is about is that you actually do like your job, but you've just kind of gotten overwhelmed by the amount of responsibility, and it's kind of taken on a life of its own. But it's not that the job isn't possibly a really good fit for you. This was like me being a recruiter. I was burnt out, but I actually was still enjoying it, and I did love it, but it was hard to enjoy and love it because I was so tired and couldn't recharge my batteries. Okay, so I'm going to take you through a step-by-step plan for how you can overcome burnout. Some of these are pretty straightforward and things that you may have already thought about but maybe haven't done, and I really want to encourage you to take some of these steps and take some action so that you can see change. Excuse me, one second. I'm getting over a cold, so I have a little bit of a cough, so excuse me if I end up coughing a little bit. So for about 1 week, I think it would be really good to keep a journal or track somewhere, maybe even on your cell phone, on a notepad on your phone or iPad or whatever you're using, to find out, like really look at how you're spending your time. So look at when you're waking up and going to sleep, and how many hours of sleep are you actually getting. I think it's interesting also, like, to see if you're going to bed at the same time and waking up around the same time, or if it's sort of an erratic sleep schedule. That will be very telling about how much rest you're getting and if you are ready to take on the day. Because when you're tired, we're not our best selves. How much time is spent exercising? And this might even be walking around at lunch. You could count, but exercise is definitely, as you know, an important way to kind of keep ourselves feeling healthy and energized. And oftentimes when we're working like crazy, exercise doesn't end up making it onto the schedule. I think it's also really important to look at the meetings that you're attending, how much time you're spending in meetings, and how many of them you didn't actually need to be there. Maybe there was no contribution needed from you. It was more of a just keeping you in the loop kind of meeting. But our corporate culture has gotten to the point where there's just so many meetings, and that means that you have to do your real work after hours because you're in meetings all day. And it's interesting, I think, to take a look at that and see which ones you really need to be at and which ones you can say, I'm sorry, but I can't make it, but if there's an update I can get afterwards, that would be great. Would be something to consider. I think another thing is to really note when you are becoming unfocused and get easily distracted. How this usually looks is you start working on something and then, oh, you know what, I'm going to check my email real quick, or I'm going to see, you know, what's going on Facebook, or oh, someone just IM'd me, and I'll IM them back, and it could go on like that for a while, and then after time you realize like you haven't actually gotten anything done, and you're just kind of distracted and unfocused. So I would note how often that's happening and when it's happening. And then on the flip side, notice your productivity periods when you're in the zone, when you're most productive and most focused versus unfocused. So it's probably paying attention to things like, you know, when I'm in morning meetings or engaged in activities in the morning, I'm much more focused, but in the afternoon I tend to be less so. Or maybe it's in the evenings when I can get really, really focused. You're more of a night owl, and that's when you're most productive. But recognizing when that is really important. So step 2 is then, you know, take that information and figure out how you can make small incremental changes to improving your productivity and the use of your time. You know, one suggestion, which I know can be hard for people to do because FaceTime can often be a big thing at work. Being at the office shows that you're committed, but it's not really true. You're not necessarily less committed when you're not there. But I think if you can leave the office earlier, 1 to 2 nights per week, even if it's 30 minutes earlier, to take care of yourself a little bit more and not be constantly in work mode, that can make a nice shift. Noticing those periods when you become unfocused, like stop what you're doing when you realize like, oh, I'm jumping around, I'm not getting anything productive done, and take a 10-minute break. Go walk around, go get a cup of coffee or a drink, and while you're doing that, think about when you get back to your desk, how do you want to focus in the next 30 minutes or an hour, and kind of hit the reset button. I also highly recommend blocking your calendar for those in-the-zone periods of time so that you can actually work on your most important projects and responsibilities then, and not allow people to book meetings during those times. And you might just do it 2 or 3 times a week, maybe not every day, but really hold that time sacred and don't give it away unless it's absolutely imperative that, like, oh, I have to attend a meeting that came up and I don't have a choice. But what I've seen people do is they block the calendar and then they tell people, oh, it's not really blocked. You can schedule something, and they give it away and they go right back to being unproductive. So start saying no to some of those meetings that you really don't need to be in. And I think this is about like releasing your ego from it a bit, because I know that it feels good that they want you there and they may want your opinion, but the reality is your time is better spent elsewhere, and you don't really need to be there, and it will not affect, I guarantee you, it will not affect your ability to do your job effectively. In fact, people will stop inviting you to things when they realize they don't absolutely need you there, and they're going to save you time and themselves time as well. So this one, a lot of people might think, oh, am I crazy? But I would try for even a couple of nights a week to not respond to any emails after you leave the office unless they are urgent, like really, really urgent. So ask yourself the question, does this need to be resolved, or this question someone's asking need to be resolved tonight, or can it wait till tomorrow? And 9 times out of 10, everything can wait until tomorrow. They're not urgent. They're not crucial. And to give yourself permission to not have to respond to all of them. There's this, idea that people get used to how quickly you respond to things and start to expect it. And if you're not responding as quickly, then they notice that their own expectations around when to hear from you. And they will also, in turn, probably start acting the same way. So, I don't know if you've worked with anyone who doesn't respond right away. but maybe responds the next day, and you know that, like, if you have something urgent, you're probably better off going and talking to them. Otherwise, you may get a response a day later, and that's fine. It's not going to set you back. But when people respond quickly, you start to get used to that, and then you feel like you have to respond quickly, and you get into that nonstop and never-ending chain of, constant email communication that isn't really necessary. So it becomes unproductive. A few other small incremental changes are to make plans with friends and family, like in the evenings, and give yourself a reason to go do something other than work and really stick to it. So I think that sometimes we don't schedule it because there might be a work emergency and we don't want to flake out on our friends or family, but I think it's important to stay true to your commitments to friends and family and have that interaction, because it's something that I'm sure you enjoy and it will make you happier to spend time with them. So make that a priority. Excuse me. I think it's also important to take breaks, a little bit of a break after the completion of a big project, to really celebrate the accomplishment and recover from all of that work that you just did before moving on to the next thing. I think what we typically see happen is just like they snowball one project after another and you never get any break in between, and that's also what creates that burnout. Another thing to consider is socializing outside of your professional group, just to get different perspectives, to not always be in work mode all the time. And then lastly, check in with what you loved about your job in the first place and see how you can bring some of those elements back in. What's missing that used to be there, or what's replaced it that you can remove if possible. Those are just some things that can be incremental changes over time that make a big difference. I think another thing that often comes up is there's a lot of fires, right? Fires that we have to put out at the office. You've been told one moment that this is like the top priority project, and then a week later there's another new top priority project, and then the week after that there's another one, and you're like, well, wait, was last week's now not high priority, and what should I be working on? And it can get very, very confusing very quickly, and you end up trying to do everything at the same priority level. And so I use this analogy of a laundry, doing laundry, and you can see in this picture it's got too many clothes trying to be stuffed into it, and it's not all fitting. Well, if you think about doing laundry, if you were to put in too many clothes or sheets and towels, and you put it on, put the laundry machine on, nothing actually gets clean because it's too packed, and so it doesn't really achieve the goal. So you have to think about doing them in separate loads, smaller loads. So if you actually have a bunch of extra sets of sheets and towels that are clean, and you've got some that you need to clean that are dirty, is it really high priority for you to clean those right now when you've got clean backup ones? Versus maybe you're on your last pair of underwear and it's more high priority. It's obviously high priority to do a load of underwear because that's your highest priority need. Now, I know that's a really basic analogy, but I think that oftentimes we don't ask the question of the priority of different things on our plate, and we need to get really clear on it so we know what to put our time and attention into, and we can set expectations around the things that are lower priority and let people know that I'm not going to be able to get to that for a little bit. Let me know if that's a problem. If it is, we may have to delegate this to somebody else, but I've got to focus on these other things and really help narrow in on what you should be working on. I think the same can be true for urgent versus important. In our culture today, it's like everything's urgent. Stop what you're doing. We've got to deal with this right now. And the reality is not all those things are actually important. It's just somebody has a fire they want put out. So I love this sort of grid of how to evaluate how to spend your time and prioritize. And I think, again, asking the questions of, is this really important? What's the outcome of this if we do this? What if we don't do it? And then prioritize based on these two things. This gives you an idea of how to do that. But I'm sure you have run into many times where it's not urgent or important, and yet somebody has made it that way or seen that way, but it really isn't something you need to be spending your time on, and you need to be able to push back on it and question it and not be afraid to do so. So I am a huge proponent of taking vacation, and I'm sure everybody says this, but I have seen so many people with all of this. They've like tapped out, or they have maxed out on how much vacation they've accrued and haven't taken it, and they're not even accruing anymore, and that is a really bad sign. And I think some of that comes from believing that what will happen if you're not in the office, like everything's going to fall apart, that they need you. And I really encourage you to divorce yourself from that and recognize that by you getting out of the office and not doing work in any way, shape, or form for a period of time allows you to really refuel, recharge your batteries, and come back refreshed and ready to be really productive in your job. And the longer you go, the less productive you are, and the less you're going to be able to do high quality work. So I've written here that I recommend taking a minimum of 8 business days, ideally 2 weeks, not, I mean, at least once a year. And I think almost everybody gets 2 weeks vacation in the corporate world, and maybe a little bit more. But I think taking a longer period of time does wonders, and here's why. If you are out of the office on vacation for less than 5 days, people will wait for you to come back to solve the problems. So when you come back, you have this huge pile of work to do to catch up on everything that you missed out on over 4 to 5 days. But if you're gone for more than a week, people solve that problem while you're gone. So when you come back, you actually just kind of keep moving forward, because there isn't that much you need to attend to that happened while you were gone. It was handled. 9 times out of 10, it got handled. So I really encourage you to take longer vacations. It also gives you a chance to really detach from work and just enjoy some off time. And it doesn't even mean that you have to go anywhere. If you don't have the money to go on a luxurious vacation, that's okay. Just don't go to work. Go do some fun things that you enjoy doing and relax and recuperate. I also highly recommend that you let everybody know that you will not be checking email or responding to email until you return. Put it on your out of office. I will not be responding to email, and if you have any questions about X, Y, and Z, contact these people. Make sure that there's somebody else they can go to. But you really need to stick to it. Like, I know it's tempting to read your email while you're on vacation, and that's fine. Maybe you read through it, know what's going on, but do not respond. They will figure it out. They really will. And lastly, I really encourage you to not ever let one day of vacation roll over to the next year. Take it all. Your company is giving it to you for a reason. It's for your good. It's for the good of your team, the people you work with. Everybody wins when you take vacation. So plan your vacation today, put it on the books, and get out of the office. And the last step is you've got to go talk to your manager, your boss, and see what you can work out in terms of setting some different boundaries, and so that you can get back to your high-performing self. So make sure you're incredibly clear on what you need in order to become a high performer again. What boundaries do you need to set? And be really specific about it. Is it that I am not a morning person, and so coming in at 8 in the morning is really tough for me. I'm pretty much still asleep until 9. I'm not productive. I'd like to start coming in at 9. How can we make that happen, as an example? Or I don't want to work on the weekends. The weekends are my time. When it's on an occasion, I'm happy to do it, but not on a regular basis, for example. And I know that that can be hard in some cultures that have this 24/7 work environment, and that's something that you may need to evaluate, whether it is the right place for you if they are not recognizing your need to have some work-life balance and to give you the ability to be energized by your work and have a productive work day. So when you meet with your manager, you may need to tell them that you are burnout. They might not know. They might not realize what's happening, and you need to make sure they're aware of it. That's the first and #1 thing. And keep it on a positive note. This isn't about you going in and complaining and whining about how awful you feel, but reminding them that you still love your job and that you know that you can be really good at it, but maybe there's some things that are keeping that from happening, and that's what you would like to discuss. And then negotiate with them for that change. So some tips on negotiating. I think it's super important that you're clear on what you need. And that you can express it and really put out there what your needs are and why that will have a positive impact. And you want to stay calm and unemotional, because when you get emotional during any kind of negotiation, you lose your ability to listen well, and it also can make the other person really uncomfortable and not want to negotiate with you. So take a deep breath, really try and remain calm during this discussion. And another key thing is really put yourself in their shoes. So if you have certain needs and imagine how will that affect them if they were to give it to you. Is that going to be a problem for them? What would be some of the issues? Sort of anticipate what that would be and understand what their side of it is. How will it put them in a tough spot if you don't come in until 9:30 instead of at 8? And that's where then the negotiation can take place. So if they can't meet a request or they're like, no, that's not possible, keep asking questions until you can really find out what's at the heart of their rationale or their reasoning. So a great question to ask is, what other options would you consider? So let them brainstorm with you. Okay, well, maybe it'd be all right if you came in Mondays and Thursdays at 9:30, but on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I need you here earlier because of X meetings that your attendance is required at. So you kind of can start to make some headway by just opening up what they think would work. Focus on how helping you will actually help them. So they want you to be a high performer. They want you to be doing great work. Make sure that they know by meeting some of your needs that they're going to get a high performer back. And somebody who loves their job and is committed is going to stick around. That's what they want to hear. So make sure you focus on that. And I know I've written this again, but be very clear on what you want and why. So I'm hitting you over the head with that one because that's the most important point. So I wanted to stop for a second and see if there are any questions about how you can get over burnout and change some of your environment to go back to being a high performer again and loving your job.
Yes, we have one great question actually. What if you are burned out and you need a career change? Where should you focus your time?
That is a great question. My thought is probably focusing on solving the burnout would be the best way to start, and see what difference that makes over the next month or so if you can do some of these things, if you can make small incremental changes and see if, oh, you know what, I actually have a newfound love for my job again. I didn't think that was possible. You may learn you don't need a career change, but if you do deal with some of the burnout and you're still feeling those symptoms of needing a career change, then I would start moving into attacking what it would take to move into another career. So first deal with burnout, then look into making a career change if it's still necessary.
Okay, perfect. We have another one, and then we should probably switch to career change section. Being a CEO, these small incremental changes are the luxury I cannot afford. What do you suggest I should do?
So if I understand the question, being the CEO, these changes aren't possible?
Yes, that's the question.
I have more of a question for you then. If you're the CEO and you're in charge, then you are in an amazing position to actually switch the way you approach your work, and maybe even can be a leader for how others can approach their work. So, I think you're setting maybe the focus for how you're getting your work done, but it's not working for you. And you have an amazing opportunity to change it and let others know what changes you're making and why, and maybe even encourage them to do the same. Because I think at the end of the day, you want everybody in your company to be a high performer and to want to stay and stick around, and you can be the model for that. So I think you're in an amazing position to make those changes and show everyone else that it's possible to do it themselves.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, we're now going to move on with the rest of the presentation, and we're going to probably extend the presentation for 10 or 15 minutes because we have more good questions to come. So that's just a note for our attendees.
Great. So let's get into making a career change and how to approach that. All right, the number one mistake that I see people make when they're thinking about making a career shift is that they focus almost entirely on how to translate their skills and their knowledge into a new job, and they get stuck. You know, for example, maybe it's somebody who's been a lawyer for 10 or 15 years and really is not excited about being a lawyer anymore and would like to go into maybe business development or do something that's more on the strategic side of a corporation and get out of being a lawyer. And so they focus on their skills and knowledge as a lawyer and think, how the heck would I ever become a business development executive? You know, all I know is how to be a lawyer. And they feel like it's not possible. And they continue being a lawyer and are very frustrated. And the difference is, and what I have people focus on, and I think is absolutely crucial, is to be focusing on your natural talents and your values and really getting clear on what they are. So if you go back to that example of the lawyer wanting to go into business development, you know, that lawyer, I would encourage that lawyer to really look and see what gifts and talents that do you have that no one could teach you, and how can you articulate those, and how would they be used as a business development person or in a business development role. And it's up to you to be able to articulate how you could take those gifts and talents plus some of your background and apply them and how they can translate into another job. And I think also with your values, it's really understanding what you care about most, what you need to honor for yourself so that you can be your best self, so that you can experience more fulfillment, and see if these other jobs that you might be interested in will honor those values, if they will line up better. And so don't worry so much about skills and knowledge, because you can always obtain more of those. That's the easy part. What you can obtain are new gifts and talents. You have to tap into what they are and really exploit them when you go out to move into another career. So, and I want to just mention this one quote that I think is really great. The most successful people start with dominant talent and then add skills, knowledge, and practice to the mix. When they do this, the raw talent actually serves as a multiplier. And what is typically happening is that you may not be feeling a lot of fulfillment in your career because your talents aren't being tapped into or appreciated, and maybe your values are also not being honored, and there's a lot of friction. So that's what I experienced when I was in the film business. It was tapping into my talents, but the values were not there, and I was frustrated. You know, I just couldn't get on the same page with people, and it caused me a lot of frustration. And, you know, when I was on the consulting side at Accenture, I was not able to tap into my talents. Like, my talents were not needed in the role that I had, and I was mediocre at that job at best, and it was really unsatisfying. So, you know, I think I'm a good example of somebody who has, I've gained and added more skills and knowledge over the time, but still made a lot of different career transitions because I focused on those talents and values first. So how do you unearth these natural talents? How do you find out what you're really good at? A lot of times it's hidden. You might actually not see your own talents because you think everybody has this. A good example might be somebody who has an amazing amount of empathy. They're the person who walks into a conference room and can look around the room in 30 seconds, kind of know the mood of each person there, like who's engaged, who's having a bad day, who's excited, who's distracted. And, you know, even as somebody is talking during that meeting, they'll sense like how people are reacting. And, you know, if they're the one leading the conversation, they can switch gears and really facilitate that because they have this empathetic ability. And they probably think everybody sees this, but it's not true. There are plenty of people who don't have that and don't pick up on those cues and have to be told by people like, hey, I'm upset. And they're like, oh, you're upset, are you? You know, tell me more. So, you know, the key is to really unearth your natural talents. So what I recommend is you might really want to set aside like a good hour, or maybe even 20 minutes would be good as a starting point. And I want you to think about 3 different categories. So rapid learnings. This is anything you've learned more quickly or easily than others. And I want you to go back and I want you to think, at 10 years of age, what did I learn more quickly and easily than others? Maybe this is something at school. Maybe it's something that you did outside of some sort of activity that you were involved in, where you picked up on things a lot faster than other people, and you were, you know, wanting to jump ahead, and what's next, and what's, you know, I want to do more. What else can I learn about this subject? And really look at what your rapid learnings were at maybe 5-year increments. So now you're 15, you're a teenager. What were you good at learning, you know, faster at learning then? What about when you were 20, 25, and so on? I want you to then look at yearnings. These are activities you've found yourself drawn to at different parts and times in your life. So just brainstorming and listing out everything. And they can be something as simple as, I like cooking. I was always in the kitchen, you know, helping out since the age of 5. I just loved being in the kitchen. That is a yearning. It could be, I was obsessed with board games. You know, I just loved playing board games. I was always trying to get someone to play them with me. And then just kind of create a long laundry list of things. And then for satisfactions, these are activities that brought you the most satisfaction. So maybe you've done a lot of different things in your life, but what are the ones that really made you feel more alive, made you excited to engage in them? Not just something that you did maybe out of duty, or because, you know, your parents wanted you to do it, or your boss wanted you to do it, or your wife or your husband or whomever, you know, a friend wanted you to do it, but what was really satisfying to you. So this is like the start of your inventory, and really like take some time to look at yourself and kind of relive these different aspects of your life and see what kind of comes up. So I want you to also think about, you know, actually, yeah, sorry about that. You're going to start to notice some themes, and I want you to start to see what are some commonalities between things that maybe you did when you were a kid and what you've done now and how that applies. And you'll start to form pictures of, you know, maybe it's like, gosh, I've always been attracted to team sports. Like, I really like working in teams. What is it that I like about working in teams? What does that bring to me? Start asking yourself more questions. Or maybe it's like, wow, actually everything that I did was individual. I really like to own my own output and not necessarily rely on those of others, you know, and it just starts to help you see how you are in your best self and to give yourself permission to be that person. There's nothing wrong with any of these things. They can all be great if applied in the right way. Now, something that I see very often, and why people have a hard time selling themselves into a new type of job, is that they're not specific enough about how they describe their talents, like what really makes them unique. So an example is, and I can't even tell you how many times people would tell me in an interview, when I asked them, like, what is a strength or talent of yours, they would say, well, I'm a really good communicator. And they would sort of give you this vague answer. And I didn't really know what that meant, and it wasn't very inspiring, and I didn't know how that might apply to the job, and they weren't very clear on it either. But if you think about it in another way, of to say, I have really strong communication skills, and maybe if this were you, you know, you have to come up with your own thing. You know, I'm a very persuasive writer who can motivate and inspire people into action. I'm a dynamic public speaker. I enjoy getting up in front of audiences and you know, helping them make change through, you know, my storytelling. Whatever it might be, get really specific, you know, really narrow in, like, oh, I like writing. What is it you like about writing? What kinds of things do you like to write? What have people said about your writing? What do they enjoy about it? You know, really think about how you can apply that in a more specific way. And it is much more inspiring because then you can say, now how I could use this in my next job is X, Y, and Z. So you're by being specific, you're going to start seeing light bulbs go off around what you might be able to apply it towards and how that could be a high impact to an organization or to whatever you do, the people that you work with. And then you want to get in touch with your core values. So how do you identify your values? And I want to mention that some of your talents may actually come out as well as in doing this exercise. So this is like a twofer, I guess you could say. But actually, I want you to do this right now as you're listening to this. I want you to think about, even just could be one or two, just during this moment, peak experiences you've had in your life. It doesn't have to be something that's career related. It could be anything in your life, any kind of personal experience. It could be a moment, a day, a week. It could be a year-long period where you had a peak experience where you felt most alive and in your full power. You know, where maybe you didn't care what anyone thought of you. You were just really in a zone of aliveness. So I just want you to take a moment and just see what immediately pops in your mind, and maybe just jot it down, and you can come back to it later and mine for some values in it. But I want you to just take a moment and picture some moments where you've been most alive.
Kelly?
Capture that.
I just need to interrupt you for a second. We don't have much time, so maybe we can just speed up the last part of the presentation so that we can have enough time for a few questions.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect.
So what you're going to do then when you come up with these peak experiences is really just start to write down everything about it that made it so memorable and made you feel alive. And I think what you're doing is you're noticing, like, wow, there are some values in there, and I gave you some examples here, like, part of the reason that, I had a peak experience when I won this award was because I was determined and I was focused, and, it gave me a sense of adventure or whatever. Those are values. So you just want to be able to start to extract out what made it so powerful for you. And like I said, you might also find there's some talents in there. Another way to mine for values is to think about things that annoy or frustrate you, maybe pet peeves. And what this will tell you is your values are actually the exact opposite of that. So maybe you hate getting stuck in traffic, and you feel like you're trapped in your car and you can't go anywhere, and it's really frustrating. That may be a value of needing freedom or independence, or something where you don't like feeling boxed in and that you can't go anywhere and you have no control. So that might be an example. Or getting someone who's really slow at the grocery store at checking you out. Efficiency might be a value of yours. So try and narrow down the list of values. I mean, really, try and pull out everything you can. It could be 20, 30 values long, but then narrow it down to 5 or 6 that truly matter most. And write a short description, like what it really means to you, that maybe integrity is a value of yours. Is that about respect, commitment, being ethical, bringing good to self and others, truth, whatever it is, write your own short description. And lastly, take a moment and think about how much you're honoring those values today in your life, both personally and professionally. So give them a rating of 1 to 10 and see whether you're really honoring them or it's something that you value but it's just not showing up in your life at all. And you might start to notice how this is applying to your career and why you might be so frustrated. It will also help you decide moving forward what you need in order to find more fulfillment, is a place and an environment and an opportunity that is going to tap more into your values. The last thing I would do is just also take inventory on skills, knowledge, interests, and passions. And these are all pretty straightforward, so I'm not going to spend too much time, but if you want to just jot down these 4 areas, again, just doing a brainstorm on what you have here. And I think when you combine all of this inventory, you really are going to see some light bulbs going off, and to look for those themes. You know, what do they have in common? How do things overlap? What combines well with your talents? Which ones would you hate to live without? And I think really start seeing how much of your talents and values are showing up in your current job and in past jobs, and how can you get more of that in the future. I think you also have to give yourself a little time to let this sink in and marinate and have some of those light bulbs go off. So be patient with yourself. You may not have the answer immediately. And let ideas kind of percolate, and when you do have something that maybe just keeps coming up over and over that you get really excited about, go talk to people who do that kind of work. Find out what it's like. See if it actually meets up with your expectations. And they'd also be great people to talk about in terms of how to get into that type of work. Start researching jobs that are available and see how well they match up with your talents and values. Like, start looking at job descriptions, and you know, if you could strip away some of the skills and knowledge they're looking for and really look at, like, what are the core components of someone who does this job? What would it take to be successful in that job from a talent standpoint? You know, if you're not a strategic thinker, you may not want to be in a job that requires a lot of strategic thinking, right? So it's kind of matching yourself up with the jobs that are out there and being really honest. And at the end of the day, you just have to listen to your gut instincts and trust yourself. Your intellect will try to tell you what's practical and realistic, but your gut is the one that tells you what you are going to find most satisfying and what's going to make you the happiest, and it knows you better than anything. So I might have to skip Erin's story. I was going to inspire you with a story with how Erin made a career transition, but I think I will unfortunately speed past this. So I'm just going to give you a second to read this because I think it's really true when you're facing a career transition. Be brave and be patient. Have faith in yourself. Trust in the significance of your life and the purpose of your passion. You are strong enough to sit in the space between spaces and allow divine inspiration to shed some light. When you put positive energy and productive effort into the world, it will come back to you, occasionally in ways you might not immediately understand and on a time frame you didn't expect. Look, listen, learn, stay open. Your destiny is awaiting you. I really love that quote. So let me just check in, Marjana, do you want me to continue on with the elevator pitch really quickly? I'm happy to do that. Or do you want to skip to?
Yes,
okay.
we can have another 5 minutes and wrap up with 2 or 3 questions. I guess that's fine. Okay.
So this is actually pretty straightforward. It's not easy to do, but if you understand the components, you'll absolutely be able to have an amazing, like, 3 to 4 sentence elevator pitch that can go on your resume. Your LinkedIn profile can be the thing that you tell people when they ask you, what do you do, or what are you looking for? So here are the components, and just some things that I want you to think about. Do not start out when you want to go into a career transition on rewriting your resume. Start with the elevator pitch. That is the most important first thing that you need to do. And an elevator pitch is not about telling somebody when they ask you, so what do you do? Is giving them your entire background. Well, I've worked for 15 years in this company and doing this thing, and you will have already lost them. They will not be excited or motivated by that to find out more because you just gave them, like, your whole life story in 5 minutes. Instead, you want to think of an elevator pitch as like a trailer to a movie, the movie of you. You want to get them to want to see the rest of the movie. So it's really more of like a tease to have them ask more questions. So how do you do it? So if you were to think about one sentence for each of the 3 things, that is your elevator pitch. So you want to be specific about the very first sentence is what. What are you looking for, or what do you do? And to be very specific in one sentence, narrow it down. I'll give you some examples in a moment. How is the next sentence. This is about, hold on one sec, excuse me, the talents and abilities you possess that make you a standout. So it's related, these are going back into being able to articulate clearly your talents and how that applies to the job that you want to do or that you are doing. So you're starting to tie together what's great about you. And then the why. Why do you actually do what you do? Why do you care about it? What's the impact that you want to have? Why are you passionate about it? So it's really what, how, and why are the three components. So a sentence, maybe two for how, and one sentence for why. So let me give you an example of a not so great elevator pitch. And this is what I see on almost every single resume, is like something like this, and it's just not inspiring. Senior executive with 20+ years of experience focusing on building world-class service businesses. Strong, consistent track record in building robust, scalable, customer-focused service organizations. Experience building global technical teams to support evolving technologies. I don't know about you, but I sort of glazed over halfway through it. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. Don't really remember a whole lot, except I think they do customer-facing or focused services. Now, if we took that same person and we created a different type of elevator pitch, now let's look at it another way. As an executive leader, I want to run a high-growth, profitable services organization for a software company in which serving the customer is core to the success of the business. Very specific, right? We know it's a software company, a high-growth, profitable services organization focused on the customer. And continuing on into the how, consistently built top-tier teams that understand the principles of running sound businesses, driving results, and most importantly, customer loyalty and employee retention. I want to help customers. This is the why. I want to help customers use technology to solve business problems quickly and efficiently while delighting them at the same time. I'm passionate about adding mind-blowing value for customers. So you have a lot clearer sense of what this person is about, what they're looking for, why they're into it. And now I want to know more. I want to know, well, where have you worked? How have you done it? You know, and I want to follow up and ask more questions and figure out if I know of any places that could use someone like this executive leader. So ultimately, you know, get creative. Use your own language style. You know, it doesn't need to be super professional. I think that's another mistake people make, is that, you know, if you look at that first example I gave you, it's very professional, but it's also a little boring and a little vanilla. It doesn't have a lot of life and energy, and it doesn't have personality in it. So put your personality into this. Speak in a way that sounds like you. When you know what you want and why, when you have that clarity, it makes it much easier for people to help you. You've probably had the experience at one time or another where you asked somebody a question like that, maybe was looking for a new job, and you said, well, what are you looking for? And you get this rambling answer where they're like, well, I don't know, I think, you know, marketing might be interesting, but, you know, I could also be interested in this, and maybe I could do that. I mean, really, I'm open to anything. And at the end of it, you don't know how to help them. So the point of a good elevator pitch is it makes it easy for people to help you, and they'll actually be inspired to help you. They'll be like, oh, I have someone I want to introduce you to, or have you thought about this, or what about that? And now you know you've engaged them very quickly and easily. Once you've got this pitch down, you need to put it out there as to anybody, absolutely anybody, the person that you meet in line getting coffee, to, you know, people who are even close friends and family members, you know, people you haven't seen in years. You need to tell everybody what you're looking for and let them show up and help you out. You could also use your elevator pitch to be in the summary section on your LinkedIn profile, and as well as the top of your resume as an overview, or like your summary section. Again, it's just a great lead-in to what it is that you're looking for and why you'd be great at it. So I think that is now the end. I just wanted to tell you really quickly, before we get to questions, a little bit about my business and ways that you might be interested in working with me. So just to kind of break down the major areas that I focus on helping people with is obviously career transition, the stuff that we just started to cover here. And with that, the pieces that I just covered, I go way more in depth with my clients and really help them tease it out and bring it all together and get that clarity. And it's really helpful to have a partner in that and somebody who's objective like me, who is not emotionally invested and in any kind of like personal relationship with you, so I can really articulate and mirror back what I'm seeing and question things. So it can be a really helpful process to go through with somebody. And then obviously with my recruiting background, I help people with actually getting the job and all of the different things that you need to tackle with getting a job and understanding what recruiters are looking for, how to really nail the interview and get job offers. And so job search strategy is a big piece of what I help people with. And then on the other side, personal branding and image consulting. So I think it's really an overlooked thing that people aren't being thoughtful or putting a lot of thought, I should say, into what is their brand, what do they want to be known for, what kind of reach and reputation do they want to have, and then how to consistently deliver on that. And it's both, looking at your talents and your values, that's a big part of your personal brand, then also the image piece of like, how is that matching up in the way you present yourself? So, and making first impressions and creating a powerful presence. And really having the things that you want to attract come your way and not attracting the things that you don't want. So I have a newsletter that I send out every 2 weeks with great tips and advice. So head on over to my website, which is easy to remember, kellystuder.com, and sign up for my newsletter so you don't miss out on them in the future. And if you want to contact me for a consultation or you have any other questions even about today's webinar, please feel free to drop me an email. I would love to hear from you.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Kelly. We do have 2 questions that I would like for us to answer if possible, and then we're going to wrap up the presentation. The first one is, I just left the company with 24/7 culture due to burnout. What is the best way to communicate this during interviews for new positions so it is positive?
Okay. That is a great question. I think, as you probably know, you don't want to get too negative in an interview, but you want to spin it in a positive light. And how I would recommend doing that is to be very honest about what you learned from that experience and how you want to change that in the future. And that, maybe even using some of the examples that I gave in terms of how you could make change, I would say, I understand that we are a 24/7 culture with technology allowing us to work around the clock. And what I've learned about myself is that it's important for me to have work-life balance. And I want to get much more focused. And what I've learned about myself is how to get much more focused so I can be highly productive during the workday, but I can also have time for my personal life. And I'm looking for a company that is also going to support me in that values that, and lives up to that and really walks the talk what's the saying? Talks the talk and walks the walk. And I think it's important for you to stress that you want to be at a company that values that. And if they don't, that is going to be a sign to you that you don't want to join that company. And I think that's a good question actually to ask of the hiring manager. How do you balance work-life for yourself, and how do you set that up for your team? And what does that look like? What are the expectations? I would actually ask them that and find out how they operate. But don't get yourself into the same situation that you did last time. It might be worth continuing to look for another opportunity if it's not the right place.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Kelly. And here's another one. I realize I need a career change, but I'm afraid of taking the risk since I have a secure and rewarding job. What can I do to get over my fear?
I think that is about determining what is more important to you. Is it the well-paying job, or is it your ultimate happiness? And I think if you are really miserable in your job, it's not worth sticking around just for the paycheck. I had an amazing paycheck from Salesforce.com, and I walked away from it to start my own business, which is a high-risk thing to do. I've had to change up my lifestyle a little bit, but I am so excited to get up every morning. I was depressed working in my last job. It was really upsetting. It took a toll on my entire life. It really oozed into everything. And you know what, when I had retail, I would go do retail therapy. You know, I would go out and buy more shoes because I had the money. And you know what, it did make me feel better. Yeah, I like wearing the nice shoes, but ultimately I think you need to figure out what is most important to you, and also think about a career change incrementally. You know, if you know you want to move towards something totally different, maybe start getting there one step at a time, where you don't have to take, you know, major steps back like I did when I went into the film business and really went to the very, you know, bottom and worked my way up. But you can do it incrementally, so you don't have to sacrifice your income, but you can start moving closer and closer to something that's going to be much more satisfying. But if you're miserable, I highly encourage you to get out. You're not going to be a high performer. You're not going to feel good about yourself. Your confidence is going to continue to plummet, and you're not going to get promotions and raises. So, you know, it's really a choice, I think, that you need to make long-term about your own happiness and fulfillment.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much, Kelly, for the great presentation. I'm 100% sure that it was really, you know, highly appreciated from attendees. And I would again like to thank you all for attending the webinar today. I wish you all the great rest of the day. Thanks so much.
Thank you all very much.
Bye-bye.